So there are two types of waves, the tidal wave and the wind wave, which is more common. The way wind waves work is that wind actually hits the water and gets deflected upward, and what this does is add energy to the wave's forward movement, so this wave continues to move forward. So tidal waves are much larger than wind waves, and as opposed to wind waves, these are actually caused by the gravitational relationship of the sun and the moon. Both tidal and wind waves can create both depositional and erosional beaches. So the difference between a depositional and an erosional beach is a depositional beach takes sediment from the ocean, and the waves actually move that up to form different features on the beach. Whereas an erosional beach is the power of the waves actually eroding landforms, such as the sediment that's already existed, or rock faces or such, to create features such as wave-cut platforms.
Today we will be discussing wave-cut platform and the processes involved in its formation. So if we take a look at the diagram, right here is the low water mark, and right here is the high water mark. So these watermarks are significant because in between them, the height varies, meaning that most of the erosion will occur here. And so this area is the most prone to erosion, which means that the cliff will retreat the most rapidly here. So the erosion that occurs can include hydraulic action and attrition, and basically they're a result of the destructive waves hitting the rock face. And so at the bottom of the cliff, we'll get this indentation right here, also known as the wave-cut notch. So what is over the wave-cut notch is known as the overhang. And the overhang doesn't collapse when the wave-cut notch does. So that should be noted. So the destructive waves that were previously hitting it between the high water mark and the low water mark start hitting the overhang, as well as right here and right here. Weathering is occurring, and weathering can include the biological weathering, such as freeze-thaw, and chemical weathering, such as corrosion. And so the action of both the undercutting and the weathering happening above leads to the cliff face falling away. So this right here falls away, which causes for the whole cliff face to be retreated. So this process occurs numerous times until eventually this feature right here is what we wind up with, and it looks similar to a beach. However, you can tell the difference because it is made up of solid rock instead of sand, obviously. Solid rock. And so this right here, this feature right here, is what the wave-cut platform is. So this is the wave-cut platform.
Longshore drift, or LSD abbreviated, also called littoral drift, is basically how sediment is moved down a coastline. So if we imagine that this here is our coastline, it's just coastline. And then here we have the water of the ocean. So how sediment is moved is it starts off right here in the ocean. And through a process called swash, it moves at about a 45-degree angle towards the coastline. Just like that. From there, through a process called backwash, it moves back into the ocean at a 90-degree angle. Just like that. And this process continues all the way, and that's basically how the sediment moves along the coastline. So wave refraction is essentially when waves coming towards the coastline are altered, as in their path is altered, because of some sort of a landform obstructing its path to the coastline. So instead of coming straight into the coastline, so wave refraction is essentially when waves are coming towards a coastline, right? And there's some sort of an obstruction in the form, like a landform, right? As we can see here, there's a beach over here and a beach over here, and we have this rock face, I guess you could call it. So instead of coming straight on, as if the coastline were just simply a straight beach, the wave's path actually alters. So waves coming towards here will actually alter in order to move towards this beach, and the same on this side. And what that does is that actually allows longshore drift to take place more efficiently and still allow sediment to be transferred along the coastline, even though there is this obstruction over here.
Discordant coastlines are made out of different hard and soft rocks, and the rocks are layered in discord, so they can be layered alternatively. So they can be hard and soft rocks, hard, soft. This is a bird's eye view of the sea, the coastline. So over time, when erosion occurs from the sea, the soft rock is more easily eroded, and while the hard rock takes more time to erode. This causes a formation of headlands, and bays. As we see here, the headlands are parts of the coastline that are usually high with a sheer drop and they stick out, while bays are a broad area of the coast that have been retreated towards the mainland. This happens over many, many years of erosion, as the soft rocks are worn out faster to create the bays, and the hard rocks resist the erosion and form headlands. So the erosion of the coast happens through the processes of hydraulic action, abrasion, and corrosion. Hydraulic action is when the air or water inside the cracks of the bay or headland is pushed by the force of the wave, and that widens the crack, and that would cause the bay to crack open. Abrasion, on the other hand, is when rocks are carried away with the waves. These are waves, widening, and they break off pieces of the cliff. So with the force of the wave, the cliff gets hit and some pieces come off. Lastly, corrosion is created when soluble pieces in the salt water wear away certain rock types of the cliff. So over time, with more exposure to the waves and the sea, the coastline becomes weaker and the rock wears away. A concordant coastline is a coastline that is made out of only one type of rock. So in this case, it could be hard rock on the coastline, and then it has a soft rock layer behind it. The concordant coastlines are eroded by the same processes of erosion that I described earlier: hydraulic action, corrosion, and abrasion. The rate of the erosion depends on the type of the material the coast is made of. More resistant rock or hard rock, such as, for example, granite, will erode much slower than less resistant rock, such as, for example, chalk, which is an example of soft rock, which erodes much quicker. When the hard rock is eroded away, as seen in figure 2, this would be the hard rock, and this would be the soft rock. So when the hard rock is eroded away, the areas of the soft rock will be exposed to the erosion of the sea. So when they're exposed, the erosion will act more heavily on these areas, as the soft rock behind the hard rock coastline will begin to erode due to the wave refraction and diffraction. So wave refraction, in a nutshell, is a process by which waves change their direction as they approach the coast. So refraction makes the waves turn to become parallel to the land. They occur when the waves encounter obstacles underwater. Then the water slows down due to friction of the shallow area. The deep water crest can catch up, causing the water to curve towards or around the obstacle. So in the case of bays, the waves tend to diverge as they approach the bays. That's due to the decreased wavelength and the reduced erosive energy, as it's a dome structure. The energy spreads out, and that causes deposition in the waves. In the case of headlands, for example, the waves tend to converge as they approach the headlands, as we described earlier. So this would be process of wave refraction in headlands, as due to the increased wave height, and that causes greater erosive energy, and the energy concentration on the headland further creates erosion around it. So it further makes the headland be shaped like a headland. This can cause the creation or formation of lagoons after many years. So wave diffraction occurs when waves change their direction and pass through an opening of a barrier. These waves continue past through the opening of a barrier, in this case a bay, and curve towards a protected area behind it. As the waves approach the shore, they slow down, as the bays are in low energy zones. This results in the gradual bending of waves toward the shore in a shallow area, which expands the bays. So dune succession. What is succession? Succession is the long-term change in the composition of a community. It explains how ecosystems develop from bare substrate, the natural environment in which an organism lives, over a period of time. Succession happens when species change the habitat they have colonized and make it more suitable for new species. In dune succession, it is categorized as primary succession, as it occurs on previously uncolonized substrate and develops over time. And within dunes, plants must handle high levels of salinity in water, high tides, wind, moving sand, and often lack of moisture as well. So plants have to adapt to this environment by having long roots and curved leaves, for example. Now, there are 6 stages to the succession of dunes. So succession begins with stage 1, where its sand is continually moving, and the sand grains move inland until they meet any form of obstruction. It also has very little freely available fresh water. However, some water is still available for plants to be able to start colonizing the dunes. There's also a lot of salt derived from the sea spraying the sand, which may dissolve in the water. Also, the dune is made out of hard, inorganic grains of sand, and in this embryo dune, the stage 1, there is also very few nutrients available because there is not yet any dead organic matter being recycled within the sand. Some dune pioneer plants are also able to fix their nitrogen in their roots, for example, and adapt. So, over stages 2, 3, 4, and 5, we see plants having many different kinds of adaptations. For example, there's high vertical growth rates of plants to keep with continuous sand deposition, as well as small or rolled leaves, which decrease the surface area for their transpiration through the waxy cuticle, which prevents water loss, and succulent tissues, which can store water. We also see seeds and spores being carried around by the wind, so some of which land on the embryo dune, and other kinds of dunes are formed. We also see growth of plants, and also
we're going to talk about coastal management systems, and I'm going to start off with groins. Groins are a hard engineering method used to prevent beach erosion that happens through the process of LSD by trapping sediment. Now, before I go into the pros and cons, I'm going to quickly explain how a groin works. Now, this dotted line is a coastline, and through the process of LSD that is going in this direction, the coastline will slowly erode because the sediment is being carried away. Now, the groin will usually be put perpendicular to the sea. It's a long wall made of wood or any material, but mostly wood, especially because it's relatively cheap to build. Now, when it's put there, the sediment that was traveling in that direction of LSD will be trapped. And by trapping this sediment, it will pile on, and this would be the new shape of this side of the groin, the beach. The sediment will be trapped. On the other side, however, since the sediment is not there anymore because of the process of LSD is being prevented, the beach will erode quicker. Now, usually in beaches, they would put multiple groins to keep it at constant so this erosion doesn't happen. Now, some pros and cons. Some pros, it reduces the impact of LSD, it reserves beaches, and it's relatively cheap to build in comparison to like seawalls or other measures. Cons is it could be damaging, especially if it's placed in the wrong position, or if there are not enough of them, then again the erosion will be moved down beach and it will have a greater amount of erosion at a more rapid rate. And the second one is it's visual pollution. A lot of people don't like to see groins because it kind of takes away from the natural beauty of a beach, which is one of the things that most hard engineering methods will suffer from. And if there is a large storm, most groins are not able or not long enough to prevent LSD from erosion from happening. It will slow the erosion rate, and as well it will effectively increase the lifespan of the wall because there's not as much energy hitting the wall every time. Another con of a seawall is that it is very expensive, and in the long run expensive to rebuild or maintain in comparison to other coastal protection measures. Due to time restraints, the last hard engineering method we'll talk about is rock armor. So rock armor is basically, or riprap, a large boulders huddled together in front of the beach that you want to protect, or the cliff that you want to protect from wave energy. So the way it works, it dissipates wave energy through the use of these rocks. And it's very cheap and it's resilient, especially because it's rocks, and it can also become a natural coral reef over time. As the wave attacks these rocks, it kind of bounces in and out inside of them, and every time it does that, it loses a bit of energy until it reaches the sand or the rock that will eventually would have been eroded away without the rock armor. Now, there are some cons. It restricts public access to a beach or an area, and the second one, it restricts access to marine animals such as turtles that would normally go on land. They would not be able to do it now because of these rocks, or it would become more difficult. I'll move on to soft engineering measures and beach nourishment. Beach nourishment is basically replacing sand from a beach that has been lost through erosion, usually from the ocean floor through dredging. So they take the sand and put it into and replace the beach with using dredging ships or other equipment. This sand will be replaced like that, further increasing the beach. Now, dredging is expensive, and if there are high erosion rates without hard engineering methods, then it's only a short-term solution till it has to be done again. Now, the pros are it is natural. And beaches are usually a natural protection, and not only that, but it enlarges beaches for public access, leading to higher tourism and more economical gain. And the next type of measure can be taken is offshore reefs or artificial reefs. Now, the basic way it works is building either a sandbar offshore under the sea level, or using man-made materials and putting it there to create an artificial reef to reduce the wave, to dissipate the wave energy that will eventually hit the coast. Now, one of the big pros is that it's environmentally friendly, especially artificial reefs can start to grow corals and promote biodiversity and life. Again, it's also a long-term solution, and it is resilient, and it's relatively cheap, since artificial reefs only require placing these materials underwater. Now, marine life can be disturbed if placed in the wrong place without proper planning, and again, the materials used could be toxic for the water and the marine life.
Okay, so now we will be discussing bar formation. So as aforementioned, longshore drift is the process involving waves approaching a beach at the direction of the prevailing wind, which in this case is this. So we can also recall that the swash carries the sediment to the beach, whereas the backwash carries it directly down. So what occurs is that the LSD takes the shingle and sand down the coast, and so which obviously forms a spit. So the spit increasingly forms right here, and it just increasingly grows. So as the sediment moves down, until it is able to merge with the other side, which is this. And thus it forms a bar. So this is known as a bar. However, it also forms a lake right here. Okay, so how is a tumbelow formed? So basically, the process of longshore drift, as we mentioned before, causes for the material to be moved down the coast. So if the direction of the prevailing wind changes, let's say to this, then the material is continued to be transported through the original direction by longshore drift. So when the longshore drift approaches deeper water, the sediment is deposited. So as time passes, the sediment is piled up, resulting in a spit. However, it increasingly grows in length to the point where it unifies with a nearby island to form what we know as a tumbelow. And right here, obviously, is the land.